Hello, everyone.
It all kicked off on my birthday. I was driving home from a business trip, feeling worn out but eager to see my wife, Karen. We had been married for 6 years, and I had always thought we were rock solid. I looked forward to a quiet night at home with her to celebrate. Karen was my anchor, my whole world. From the day we met, I was completely captivated by her. She had this laugh that could light up even the darkest day, and her smile was like a ray of sunshine. Over the years, we built countless memories together, from spontaneous road trips to evenings spent cuddling on the couch. Every moment with her felt like a blessing, and I could not wait to be back in her arms. The drive home felt endless, maybe because I was exhausted, or maybe just because I was so eager to get there. Finally, I pulled into our driveway and noticed something odd. Karen's car was not there. I shrugged it off, figuring she had gone out to grab something special for my birthday. When I called her, she picked up on the second ring. "Hey, happy birthday, honey," she greeted me cheerfully, but there was a strange undertone in her voice I could not quite place. "Thanks, Karen. Where are you?" "I just got home," I said, doing my best to hide how tired I was. She replied, "Oh, I am at a friend's house. You should come over. I have a surprise for you." Her voice sounded overly upbeat, almost forced. Curious, I asked her for the address, which turned out to be nearby, so I climbed back into my car and drove over. As I headed there, a strange feeling gnawed at me, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe she had planned some kind of surprise party. I arrived at an unfamiliar, somewhat run-down house, which felt odd because Karen's friends usually lived in nicer areas. I knocked on the door, and it was answered by a man I did not recognize. Behind him were four other men, all giving me these strange looks. "Hey, I am here to see Karen," I said, trying to sound steady, though a sense of unease crept over me. One of the men, a big guy with tattoos up and down his arms, stepped forward. "Come on in. She is waiting for you," he said with a smirk. As soon as I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me. The air was thick with tension, and I felt my heart racing. Looking around, I tried to make sense of what was happening. "Where is Karen?" I asked, my voice wavering slightly. Tattoo guy grinned. "She'll be here soon. Why don't you sit down?" he said, motioning to an old, worn-out couch. Hesitantly, I sat, my mind racing with confusion and dread. Before I could even think of what to say next, one of the men came up behind me and struck me hard on the back of my head. Pain exploded in my skull, and everything went black. When I finally came to, my head throbbed, and I quickly realized my hands were bound behind my back, and my ankles were tied to the legs of the chair. Panic surged through me as I tried to process my situation. Then Karen walked into the room, and I was completely stunned. She was dressed in a revealing outfit I had never seen before, and she looked disturbingly pleased. A twisted smile spread across her face. It was like she had transformed into a stranger. "Karen, what is going on? Why am I tied up? And what are you wearing?" I shouted, desperate for answers. Instead of replying, she walked right up to me and slapped me across the face. "Shut up," she hissed, her eyes cold. She then pulled out a gag and forced it into my mouth, tying it tightly behind my head. I could not believe this was happening. This was the woman I loved, the one I had shared my life with. Karen sauntered over to them, swaying her hips deliberately, and it was clear that she was reveling in the attention. One by one the men approached her. They started touching her, undressing her even more, and I was forced to watch as two entered her at the same time. The third stood in front and began to roughly enter her mouth, and the rest watched, enjoying and satisfying themselves. It was a nightmare. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, disbelief, and heartbreak, all tangled up in an unbearable storm. This woman in front of me was no longer the Karen I knew, the one who laughed with me and made me feel like the luckiest man in the world. She was a stranger, and the reality of it was gut-wrenching. The gag muffled any sound I tried to make as I watched in horror. The men were relentless, taking turns with her, doing things that twisted my stomach. Through it all, she looked back at me with a wicked grin, as if savoring the torment she was putting me through. Then, as if to twist the knife even further, she shouted, "I have not been using birth control for half a year. If I get pregnant, you are going to raise the child. or I will make your life a nightmare. Her words cut deeper than any physical wound. Not only was I being forced to witness this, but now there was the looming possibility of raising a child from this nightmare. As the horrifying scene continued, I thrashed against my restraints, desperately trying to break free, but it was no use. I was trapped, both physically and emotionally, unable to do anything but watch as my life crumbled right in front of me. Every second dragged on as I sat there, helpless and humiliated, wishing that somehow this was all just a terrible dream. My cries were muffled, and the ropes dug deep into my wrists and ankles, leaving me no chance to move. The men showed no signs of stopping, taking their turns one by one, while Karen kept going along with whatever they asked. Her words about not using birth control echoed in my mind, each repetition making the whole situation feel even more surreal and devastating. Every time I managed to lock eyes with Karen, she wore that same smug, twisted smile, like she wanted me to understand just how much power she held over me. The weight of betrayal settled in my chest, crushing me. This was the woman who had been my partner, my love, and now, here she was, turning my worst nightmare into reality. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the men began to slow down, looking content while I sat there completely broken. Karen, however, was not finished. She strolled over to me, her eyes still glinting with that cruel amusement. "Get used to this," she sneered, her voice dripping with malice. "From now on, you will do everything I say, or I will make your life a living nightmare." I tried to plead, to make her understand how much she was hurting me, but the gag stopped my words. I hoped she would see the pain and desperation in my eyes, but she just leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, and by the way," she continued, "I have been with your boss more than once. He really likes me and will do whatever I ask. If I want, I can have him fire you in a heartbeat. So, think twice before you do anything stupid." Her words were like another punch to the gut. She was not just tearing apart our marriage. She was threatening everything I had worked so hard for, my job, my livelihood. With one last scornful look, she turned and left the room, with the men following close behind, leaving me bound and alone in that dark, empty space. I sat there, drowning in the silence, weighed down by the unbearable reality of what had just happened. I am not sure how long I stayed tied up like that before someone finally came in and untied me. My body ached, and my wrists and ankles throbbed from the tight ropes. Once I was free, I realized in a heartbeat that my life would never be the same. The woman I had loved had shown me a side of herself I never imagined existed, and it shattered everything I believed about us. After they left me alone in that empty house, I staggered back to my car, my mind racing with questions and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. What could have driven Karen to do this? Why would she put me through something so devastating? I knew I could not handle this on my own. I drove home, my hands shaking the entire way. Once inside, I collapsed onto the couch, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. Her threats about my job, her admission about being with my boss. It all kept replaying in my head. I felt trapped and powerless, but I knew I could not just let this slide. The next day, I reached out to my best friend, Mike. He had been there for me through everything, and I trusted he would stand by me now. We met up at a quiet coffee shop, and the moment I saw his concerned face, I broke down. I told him everything. How I had come home to find Karen gone, how she had lured me to that house, and the nightmare that followed. Mike listened, his face darkening with every word. "This is insane," he finally said, his voice tight with anger. "We cannot just let her get away with this." "I know," I said, feeling both desperate and determined, "but I do not even know where to start. Why would she do something like this? What did I do wrong?" Mike shook his head. "This is not about you doing anything wrong. It is about her. We need to figure out what is driving her, and then we need to make sure she pays for this." We spent hours brainstorming, trying to piece together any clues that could explain Karen's behavior. I remembered how she had become increasingly distant over the past year, spending more time out of the house and always having some excuse for her absences. It was all starting to make a twisted kind of sense. Mike suggested we start by gathering evidence. If she is really messing around with your boss and threatening your job, we need proof. Then we can confront them both and protect your career. With Mike's help, I began tracking Karen's movements and communications. We set up a plan to catch her in the act, using any resources we could to find the truth. It was not easy, and every step felt like a betrayal of the trust one once had in her. But I knew it had to be done. As days went by, my anger grew. I was no longer the helpless man tied to that chair. I was determined to take back control of my life and make sure Karen faced the consequences of what she had done. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that this was no impulsive mistake. It was a calculated, malicious plan to destroy me. With Mike by my side, I set out on the path of revenge. It would not be easy, and it would not be quick, but I was ready to do whatever it took to reclaim my life and expose Karen for who she truly was. Just when I thought things could not possibly get worse, they did. A few days after I had confided in Mike and we began our plan to gather evidence, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, I found 2 police officers standing there. "Mr. Johnson?" one of them asked, and I nodded, feeling a sudden knot of dread form in my stomach. "We need to speak with you about an incident involving your wife." My heart started pounding. "What incident? What happened?" I asked, voice tight with fear. The officers exchanged a look before one of them spoke again. "Your wife has accused you of locking her up and tying her in a house, leaving her to die. Several witnesses have come forward, claiming they saw you leaving her there and later helping her." I was stunned. "What? That's not true." I started, but they cut me off. "Mr. Johnson, we need you to come down to the station for questioning," the officer said in a tone that left no room for argument. "Please come with us." Feeling completely bewildered and panicked, I had no choice but to comply. As I sat in the back of the police car, my mind raced. How had Karen managed to twist the story so completely? And who were these so-called witnesses? At the station, they placed me in an interrogation room. They began asking about the night in question, and I told them everything, the truth. How Karen had lured me to that house, how she and those men had tied me up, and what they had done to me. But it was clear the officers were skeptical. Karen had beaten me to it with her fabricated story, even finding people to back her up. "You're telling us your wife and these men set up this whole scene just to frame you?" one of the officers asked, the disbelief evident in his tone. "Yes," I replied, desperate for them to understand. "She's been cheating on me, manipulating me, even admitted to sleeping with my boss just to have leverage over my job. This is all part of her plan to ruin me." But my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. They took my statement and then informed me I was being released but would need to appear in court. The charges were serious, and they would conduct a thorough investigation. As I left the station, my mind spun with anger and fear. Karen's manipulation had reached a whole new level, and now I was facing criminal charges because of her lies. I called Mike as soon as I got home, barely managing to keep my voice steady as I explained what had happened. "This is insane," Mike said, his own anger clear through the phone. "We have to fight this. We have to find proof of what really happened." Over the next few weeks, Mike and I worked tirelessly. We tracked down the men who had been with Karen that night, hoping to find any cracks in their stories. We gathered whatever evidence we could, documenting Karen's threats and her affair with my boss. Then the court proceedings began, and I found myself caught in a nightmare of legal battles and public scrutiny. Karen played the victim role perfectly, shedding tears and painting me as a monster. Every time I saw her on the stand, spinning her lies, my anger grew, but I knew I had to stay focused to prove my innocence. Mike was my rock throughout the ordeal, helping me navigate the legal maze and keep my head on straight. We knew the odds were against us, but we were determined to uncover the truth and expose Karen's deceit. The weeks leading up to the trial were a blur of anxiety and preparation. Mike and I worked around the clock to gather any evidence that could help me. Every day was a struggle to hold back my emotions and stay focused on clearing my name. Finally, the trial began, and stepping into that courtroom felt like walking into a battlefield. Karen was there, looking every bit the role of the wronged wife, her tears ready to fall at a moment's notice. Her lawyer was relentless, painting me as a dangerous, vindictive husband. The prosecution's case was strong, with witnesses who backed up Karen's fabricated story. They testified, claiming they had seen me supposedly dragging her into that house, leaving her tied up and helpless. It felt like watching a horror movie, only it was my life on the line. When it was my turn to testify, I told my side of the story with as much clarity and detail as I could. I recounted everything from that night, how Karen had called me to the house, how the men attacked me, and the horrific things I was forced to witness. I explained Karen's threats, her admission about sleeping with my boss, and how she had twisted everything to frame me. The courtroom fell silent as I spoke, and I saw some jurors shift uncomfortably in their seats. But I knew my testimony alone would not be enough. We needed solid evidence. That is when Mike stepped in. He had managed to find a few inconsistencies in the witnesses' stories, little details that hinted they might not be as honest as they appeared. He presented phone records showing calls between Karen and my boss, emails hinting at their affair, and even a few text messages showing Karen planning something significant. One of the most damning pieces of evidence came from an unexpected witness, an old friend of Karen's who had fallen out with her years before. This friend decided to come forward after hearing about the trial and testified that Karen had a history of manipulating people to get what she wanted and had bragged about controlling men. The prosecution tried to discredit this witness, but her testimony planted seeds of doubt. The case was starting to shift in my favor, but it was still a steep uphill climb. Watching Karen take the stand was gut-wrenching. She lied effortlessly, maintaining her story with tears and portraying herself as the victim. But as she spoke, I saw cracks starting to show. She stumbled over details, her story not quite aligning with what she had initially told the police. My lawyer pounced on these inconsistencies, pressing her on every point. The courtroom grew tense, the air thick with anticipation. Finally, under pressure, Karen slipped up. She contradicted herself, and the prosecution's attempt to recover only made things worse. In the end, it was the accumulation of evidence, the testimonies from those who truly knew Karen, and her own unraveling story that saved me. The jury deliberated for what felt like an eternity, but when they returned, the verdict was in my favor. Not guilty. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I was free, but my life was far from back to normal. The damage Karen had done was immense, emotionally, financially, and socially. But I had my freedom, and I had my friend Mike, who had been by my side through it all. As for Karen, she was now dealing with her own consequences. Her lies had come to light, and she was facing charges for perjury and other offenses. She no longer had the power to manipulate or harm me, or anyone else. For the first time in a long time, I felt a small sense of peace. After the trial, though technically a free man, I found my life in pieces. The scars left by Karen's actions would take a long time to heal, but I was determined to move forward. Knowing she was facing her own legal battles brought some comfort, as it meant she could no longer reach me. Yet, the damage she left behind ran deep. My relationship with my boss was strained. My colleagues regarded me with suspicion, and my personal life was shattered. Through it all, Mike remained my rock, helping me navigate the aftermath and standing by me as I began to put the pieces back together. We spent countless nights discussing what had happened, going over every detail, trying to understand how it had all spiraled so far out of control. His support was invaluable, and I knew I could not have made it through without him. One evening, a few weeks after the trial, Mike and I were sitting in my living room, sharing a couple of beers. After a stretch of silence, he finally asked, "So, what's next for you?" "I am not sure," I admitted. "I need to find a new job, for one thing, but mostly, I need to figure out how to move on from all of this." Mike nodded thoughtfully. "You should think about therapy. What you have been through is beyond traumatic, and talking to someone might really help." I knew he was right. The emotional toll of Karen's betrayal and the trial had left deep scars, and I needed help to truly heal. I decided to take his advice and started seeing a therapist. It was difficult at first to open up about everything, but gradually, it started to help. I began to understand the patterns of manipulation and abuse that Karen had used to control me, and little by little, I started rebuilding my self-esteem. Meanwhile, Mike and I continued our pursuit of justice. We wanted to make sure Karen could not harm anyone else the way she had hurt me. We gathered more evidence of her manipulative behavior, reaching out to others who had also been victims of her lies. Some were hesitant to speak up, but others were eager to share their stories, adding weight to the case against her. As the months passed, I began to see glimmers of hope. I found a new job at a different company where my reputation was not tainted by Karen's lies. The work was challenging, but it brought back a sense of purpose and stability. My new colleagues were supportive, and I even started building new friendships. Then, one day, I received a call from my lawyer. "We have some good news," he said. "Based on the additional evidence and testimonies, Karen is now facing more serious charges. It looks likely she will receive a significant sentence." Hearing this was a huge relief. Knowing that Karen would finally face justice for her actions helped me move forward. It did not erase the pain, but it felt like a step towards closure. Mike and I decided to celebrate this small victory. We went out for dinner, reminiscing about the past and discussing the future. "You have come a long way," Mike said, raising his glass. "Here's to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," I echoed, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It was the start of a new chapter, one where I could finally leave the past behind and look forward to a brighter future. The months that followed Karen's conviction were a time of intense transformation for me. With her behind bars and justice served, I finally had the space and freedom to rebuild my life, free from her constant manipulations. Therapy became a cornerstone of my recovery. Each session peeled back layers of trauma and self-doubt, slowly replacing them with self-awareness and resilience. My therapist helped me recognize the cycles of abuse and control that I had been caught in, empowering me to reclaim my sense of self-worth. Throughout this journey, Mike remained a steadfast friend. His unwavering support and encouragement were invaluable, and our bond only grew stronger. We often talked about the future, focusing on the positive steps I was taking to move forward. One day, as we sat at our favorite coffee shop discussing my progress, Mike looked at me thoughtfully. "You know," he said, "you should consider sharing your story. You have been through so much, and your experience could really help others who might be dealing with something similar." The idea intrigued me. Writing down my experiences had already given me some relief, but the thought of sharing my story more publicly was both daunting and empowering. With Mike's encouragement, I decided to start a blog, a place where I could document my journey, offering support and insights to others who might be navigating similar struggles. I started the blog as a way to share my story in detail, offering insights and creating a sense of community for others who had been through similar ordeals. Writing it all down was cathartic. I poured my heart into each post, recounting the emotional roller coaster, the legal battles, and the long journey to healing. The response was overwhelming. People from all over the world reached out, sharing their own stories and thanking me for giving them a voice. From the ashes of my old life, a new purpose began to emerge. As my blog grew in popularity, I received invitations to speak at various events and support groups. Sharing my story in person was both terrifying and liberating, but each time, I felt a little stronger. No longer was I defined by what had happened to me. Instead, I was defined by how I chose to respond and grow from it. Meanwhile, my new job was going well. I had found a supportive team and a positive work environment that valued my contributions. This fresh start was exactly what I needed, and I threw myself into my work, finding pride and satisfaction in my achievements. Amid all these changes, I realized there was one more thing I needed to do to truly move forward. I filed for divorce from Karen. The process was relatively straightforward, given her conviction and the overwhelming evidence of her actions. Yet, even with the legal side of things clear, the emotional weight of ending our marriage felt heavy. When the divorce papers were finalized, I experienced a strange blend of relief and sadness. This chapter of my life was finally closed. I could now fully let go of the pain and betrayal, looking forward to a future where Karen no longer held any control over me. One evening, after a particularly successful presentation at work, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. It was Karen. My heart skipped a beat as I read her words. She apologized for everything, saying she had realized her mistakes and was seeking forgiveness. It was a surreal moment. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her how deeply she had hurt me. But another part of me felt an odd sense of closure. I took a deep breath and simply replied, I appreciate your apology, but I need to move on with my life. I hope you find the help you need. Sending that message felt like lifting a heavy burden off my shoulders. Forgiving her did not mean forgetting or excusing her actions. It meant freeing myself from the hold they had on my heart and mind. Life continued to improve. I made new friends, explored new hobbies, and even started dating again. Trust was hard to rebuild after everything I had been through, but I was learning to let people in once more. Looking back, I could see how far I had come. The man who had been broken and betrayed now stood tall, with a renewed sense of purpose and a future full of possibilities. The journey was not over, but I no longer walked it alone. After the divorce was finalized, I felt a profound sense of liberation that I had not experienced in years. The legal ties to Karen were finally severed, and I could focus on truly rebuilding my life. My blog continued to grow, and the community that formed around it became a source of strength and inspiration. It was incredible to see how many people resonated with my story and found hope through our shared experiences. One of the biggest challenges I faced was learning to trust again. The trauma of Karen's betrayal left deep scars, and the idea of opening up to someone new was daunting. But I knew I could not let my past define my future. With my therapist's guidance, I began to slowly let people in, starting with casual friendships and eventually exploring the idea of dating. I remember my first date after the divorce vividly. Her name was Sarah, and we met in a yoga class. I had joined the class on a whim, hoping it might help me relax and stay centered, and that is where I met her. We clicked instantly and ended up grabbing coffee after class. I was a bundle of nerves, but Sarah was warm and understanding, and as we talked, I felt the walls around my heart begin to come down, brick by brick. Sarah and I continued to see each other, and over time, our relationship blossomed. She was patient, never pushing me, allowing me to heal at my own pace. She became a light in my life, showing me that love and trust were possible once more. During this time, my career also began to flourish. My dedication and hard work at my new job did not go unnoticed, and soon I was promoted to a managerial position. The accomplishment gave me a renewed sense of control and stability. One day, while sorting through some old files at home, I stumbled upon a journal from the early years of my marriage to Karen. Flipping through the pages, I remembered the love and happiness we once shared. It was bittersweet to read those entries, knowing how it all ended, but it also served as a reminder of how far I had come and how much I had grown. Inspired by this reflection, I decided to write a book about my journey. It was a daunting task, but I felt it was important to share my story fully. Writing the book, titled Breaking Free, A Journey from Betrayal to Empowerment, proved therapeutic. It allowed me to confront my pain and ultimately find closure. When the book was published a year later, the response was overwhelming. It became a bestseller in the self-help and memoir categories, and readers from all walks of life reached out, sharing their stories of resilience and recovery. It was humbling to know that my journey could inspire and help others. Sarah stood by me through it all, and our relationship continued to grow. We moved in together and began building a life rooted in trust, respect, and mutual support. The dark days of my past now felt like a distant memory, replaced by a future full of hope and possibilities. With Sarah's encouragement, I continued speaking at events and support groups, sharing my story and offering insights on recovery and empowerment. Each time I spoke, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a purpose that had come from pain but was now transforming into something healing and powerful for others. I felt a little more healed, a little more whole, as if by helping others, I was also helping myself. One day, Sarah and I were strolling through the park, enjoying a rare sunny afternoon. We talked about our future, about dreams and aspirations. It felt surreal to be making plans again, to look forward to everything life had to offer. I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness again, I admitted. She squeezed my hand and smiled. You deserve it. You have been through so much, and you've come out stronger. I am so proud of you. Her words meant the world to me, a reminder that even after the darkest of times, there was light at the end of the tunnel. Sarah's love and support had been a crucial part of my healing journey, and I was grateful for her presence in my life every single day. As time passed, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned. The importance of self-worth, the strength found in vulnerability, and the power of resilience. I began weaving these themes into my blog and talks, hoping to provide a roadmap for others going through similar struggles. Mike remained a constant presence too. Our friendship had been tested and strengthened through this ordeal, and we often talked about the future. One evening, over a couple of beers, he brought up an idea. You know, you have an incredible story and platform. Have you thought about starting a foundation or something to help people dealing with abuse and betrayal? The idea resonated with me immediately. It felt like the next step in my journey, a way to give back and create something lasting from my experiences. With Mike's help, we began laying the groundwork for a nonprofit organization aimed at providing resources, support, and education for those affected by emotional and psychological abuse. Launching the foundation was a monumental task, but it was incredibly fulfilling. We partnered with therapists, legal experts, and advocates to create a comprehensive support system. The response was heartening, and the foundation quickly became a beacon of hope for many. Through it all, I continued to grow and heal. The nightmares that once haunted me became less frequent, replaced by dreams of the future. I found joy in simple things: morning coffee with Sarah, walks in the park, laughter shared with friends. Life was not perfect, but it was real, and it was mine. Looking back, I realized that the pain and betrayal I endured had ultimately led me to a place of strength and empowerment. I had faced my darkest fears, rebuilt my life from the ground up, and found love and happiness again. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer walking it alone. With the foundation up and running, I found myself busier than ever, but it was a good kind of busy. Helping others who had been through similar experiences was immensely rewarding and gave my life a renewed sense of purpose. The foundation quickly grew, and we began offering workshops, support groups, and counseling services. The feedback we received was overwhelmingly positive, and it felt incredible to be making a real difference. Sarah was a huge part of this success. She threw herself into the work with the same passion and dedication she brought to our relationship. Watching her interact with those we were helping, seeing her kindness and empathy in action, made me fall in love with her even more. One day, as we were wrapping up a particularly successful workshop, Sarah pulled me aside. "I have been thinking," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "What if we expanded the foundation's reach? We could collaborate with other organizations, maybe even go international?" Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I could not help but smile. "That is a great idea," I agreed. "Let's start looking into potential partners and see where this can go." We spent the next few months reaching out to other organizations, building partnerships, and expanding our network. The foundation's impact grew exponentially, and soon we were hosting events and workshops in multiple cities and even internationally. It was incredible to see our vision come to life on such a large scale. During this time, I continued working on my personal healing. Therapy remained a cornerstone of my recovery, and I explored new hobbies and interests. I took up painting, something I had always wanted to try but had never found the time for. It became a therapeutic outlet, allowing me to express my emotions in a new and creative way. One evening, while I was working on a painting, Sarah came into the room holding a small box. "I have something for you," she said, her voice filled with anticipation. Curious, I set down my brush and opened the box. Inside was a beautiful watch engraved with the words, "To New Beginnings." "It is perfect," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." She smiled and kissed me on the cheek. "You deserve it. You have come so far, and I am so proud of you." Life was moving in a positive direction, but there were still challenges to face. One day, I received a call from my lawyer informing me that Karen was seeking an appeal for a reduced sentence. The news hit me like a ton of bricks. Just when I thought I had put the worst behind me, her shadow loomed over my life again. Sarah was there to support me through the ordeal. "Whatever happens, we will face it together," she said, holding my hand. "You are not alone in this." The appeal process was grueling. Reliving the past in court was emotionally exhausting, but I was determined not to let Karen's actions derail the progress I had made. With the help of my lawyer and the support of Sarah and Mike, I presented my case again, detailing the impact of Karen's actions on my life and the lives of those around me. Ultimately, The judge upheld the original sentence, and Karen's appeal was denied. It was a relief, but it also served as a reminder that healing is an ongoing journey. The past might never fully disappear, but I had the strength and support to face whatever came my way. As the years passed, the foundation continued to grow, helping thousands of people find hope and healing. Sarah and I got married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. It was a day filled with love and joy, a testament to the journey we had both traveled. Mike served as my best man, a fitting role for someone who had been my rock through so much. During his speech, he said, "We have all seen the incredible strength and resilience in this man. He is an inspiration to all of us, and I am honored to call him my friend." Looking around at the faces of those who had supported me, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had led me to this moment of peace and happiness. Sarah and I started a family, welcoming our first child a year after our wedding. Parenthood brought its own set of challenges and joys, but we faced them together, growing stronger with each passing day. Reflecting on my journey, I realized that the pain and betrayal I had endured had ultimately shaped me into a stronger, more compassionate person. It had led me to Sarah, to the foundation, and to a life filled with purpose and love. The lessons I had learned about resilience, self-worth, and the power of community became central themes in my work and my life. I continued to share my story, not just as a tale of survival, but as a beacon of hope for anyone facing their own struggles. Life was not perfect, and it never would be, but it was real, it was beautiful, and it was mine. I had reclaimed my narrative, and with the support of those I loved, I had built a future filled with promise. What do you think about this story? Write in comments. If you don't follow our channel Cheating Room, you will probably never hear from us again. If you are subscribed, congratulations, you will not miss any exciting story. Thank you for listening to this shocking story with us. See you again.
Bye bye.